What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Pillars Unpacked. Thanks so much for tuning into today's video. Today's church is going to be Westerkerk in Amsterdam of the Netherlands. This is a Protestant church located in Central Amsterdam. So we're going to check out the footage of the church, and then we'll come back after to discuss its history and some additional insight. So this episode represents a couple of firsts on the channel. This is the first church featured from both Amsterdam and more broadly the Netherlands. So I mentioned this on the last episode, but I was recently able to visit both Paris and Amsterdam. And so I'm going to have a lot of content coming on the channel from those two cities. And so this is the first featured from Amsterdam. Westerkerk, the word in Dutch, kerk, K-E-R-K, translates directly to church. So Westerkerk literally means like Western church or West church. So not super creative, but that is what that means. It's located pretty much right in central Amsterdam. It's right on the Prince's Canal is the English translation. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of the canal in Dutch because I'm just going to butcher it. But Prince's Canal is what it's called, and it literally is situated right on it, and you can see that from some of the video clips, and that's something that I think is very interesting just about the geography of Amsterdam and how the city was planned around these canals. It's quite interesting. This is a pretty old church. It was started being constructed in the 1620s, and it was completed in 1631. I'm going to talk about this more on other episodes in the future, but the Protestant Reformation played a pretty big role in Amsterdam being such an old and historic city. So there were a lot of churches that were built as places of worship in the Catholic Church that were forcibly converted to Protestant worship spaces during the Reformation. And this is actually one of the few purpose-built churches in the Protestant tradition. So this totally separate from the Catholic faith, but there are a lot of other spaces, some of which we'll cover that are, historically and are currently in the Catholic Church that, at least for a time, were forcibly converted into to Protestantism. So this is one of the oldest purpose-built Protestant churches in Amsterdam, which I think is interesting. And you can tell right away just from the kind of architectural layout, floor plan of the church, that it's very different from kind of your typical cruciform layout in a lot of Catholic churches and cathedrals that we've covered on the channel. So you can kind of tell this from just looking at the exterior. You can see where there's actually a double transept that cuts across the nave, and you can see it from the outside. But this is in the double Greek cross layout, which essentially means that if you exclude the tower from the interior, it's basically just completely symmetrical. It's different from kind of the more Catholic or traditional Catholic layout, where you have a very extended nave that ends in one transept basically towards or at the altar, and it basically keeps your eye going all the way down to the altar and up, a lot of cases with vaulted ceilings in Gothic cathedrals and other architectural styles. But the double Greek cross, basically what it does is, it rather than centering around an altar space, it centers around a pulpit, which is directly in the center, as you can see in this church. And then it basically makes for wider aisles on either side. So in a lot of cases with the larger kind of like nave, it basically in Catholic churches truncates the aisles. And again, it keeps your eye going downward. This kind of just extends those aisles on either side. And because this one's a little bit bigger and there can be a single Greek cross format, which again, basically just has the transept hitting at a different spot from, the traditional Catholic layout. And so this one is double, so it's just bigger. But again, the idea being that it centers around a pulpit and kind of like the preaching space rather than an altar. So that's the main difference. And again, you can tell it's a lot more stark and, not as many kind of dramatic color differences or stained glass or things like that. So you can definitely tell right away that this was a purpose-built Protestant church. Some historic things about the church. Again, the famous bell tower, which is huge, is very, very interesting to look at, is one thing to point out. That's one of the highlights. Another is the organ, which I think is very impressive. It has a history all of its own, and if you're interested, I would encourage you to look up more details on that, because it is extremely old, but it has been worked on, and different parts of it were restored at different times for different reasons. But it was very cool to look at, and there's some art depictions on the side. King David, King Solomon, the Ark of the Covenant, a lot of different things depicted there. So those are pretty interesting. So mentioned kind of the locale being very close to the Anne Frank house, which is one of the things this church is known for. The other is that it's the burial place of the artist Rembrandt. So, he was pretty big. He's one of the most famous artists in the entire world, but there's a big love of him in Amsterdam because he, was such a famous painter, and a lot of his pieces are in museums in Amsterdam, which I think is cool. The monument to him is, I believe it was a recreation from his famous painting, the Night's Watch, which is on display in a museum in Amsterdam. I believe he's buried just somewhere in one of the stone slabs, just in the main nave section or one of the aisles of the interior of the church, but they don't actually know where. And he's not the only person buried here. There's a lot of other notable citizens that have been buried there for a long time. Some of the stones are kind of faded. Some you can still read. But I think that's pretty interesting that he this is his final resting place. So there definitely is a lot of unique history here, even, or just in addition to it being an extremely old space. There's, again, connections to the history of Amsterdam relating to World War II, the Holocaust, this kind of like Dutch golden age of artistry connected to Rembrandt and things like that. So I enjoyed getting to see this church. I definitely recommend visiting it. It's in a very prominent kind of central location of Amsterdam, and a lot of different historical angles that you can kind of take from it. I like that it represents a little bit of a different, again, layout structure from an architecture and design perspective compared to a lot of the Catholic churches and cathedrals that we've looked at. So I think that represents kind of a nice like little difference there to highlight from it. So yeah, definitely very much enjoyed getting to see this church, and if you're interested, there's a lot more that you could look into surrounding again Anne Frank and her history, Rembrandt, and again we're going to discuss more of the broader implications of the Protestant Reformation on future episodes, but that definitely plays a role as well. So hope you enjoyed getting to see Westerkerk, and we'll be back soon with another video. Until then, keep looking up.